Welcome to the podcast. It's the worst territory in the world. Personalities, history, and other stories. We know you're craving for more knowledge. Let the champions get their glory. It's the worst territory in the world.
All right, welcome in everybody. It is your favorite time of the week where we talk about the worst of the worst, or possibly the worst of the worst. It is the worst territory in the world. I am your host, Gabe, sitting here with Chris Goff. Chris, we've got a great week. We got a great interview lined up. How is your Mardi Gras, your Ash Wednesday, all that good stuff? How's the season shaping up for you so far?
You know I love New Orleans, Gabe, so I wasn't able to go to New Orleans, but we had Mardi Gras at the winery here. Had a fantastic, couple bowls of gumbo and some bread pudding. So it was fantastic, and I'm fatter than before.
Well, last time I talked to you, you were actually on your cardio machine, so it shows that you're at least trying to maintain your.
You exercise to just stay even. That's what you do in life.
That's actually a pretty good flaw, especially when you're our age. Like the fat just doesn't come off like it used to.
No. I mean? So you're like, I want to eat something other than a salad, so I'll just like walk on a treadmill for an hour a day, and then maybe I can do that. So yeah, so you got to cut things out when you get to our age, Gabe. You cut out the alcohol, cut out the fatty foods for most of the time, but when you do, just splurge whenever you can.
Yeah. It's all about moderation. I was watching. We've gotten a lot of these last few episodes about the NWL, the Lucy Mendez episode. There's been a lot of really great feedback. Like literally, I have had people I haven't talked to in years texting me and saying, wow, really love the podcast. Love, the interviews you guys are doing. So it's been really cool. And I went back and I watched, actually, I got reminded of a Magnum Minute from a while ago. And I've always been a larger gentleman. I've been super, super fat at certain points in my life. But man, I was watching this Magnum Minute with me and the Regal twins, and I was fat as shit towards the end of the NWL, and you can edit that or whatever. But I was watching it, and I was literally like, "Woo, brother, you let the chicken and pickle really get to your hips."
Well, that's why I'm glad that we don't really put this up in video form, because anytime you put anything up in video form, actually you had the opposite effect. Usually you look back and you're like, God, I look so young and thin in every other video. And the phrase, I wish I was as fat as the first time I thought I was fat. That is a great phrase, because it's always so true. You're like, remember when you were like 21, you're like, God, I'm such a fat ass. And like now you're like 30 pounds more and you're like, yeah, I wish I was that fat again.
Like I obviously doing stuff with CSW and like doing the ring announcing, I look at myself and I'm like, I'm all right with that. I'm all right with the way I look right now. Cause I work out but man, I was especially standing next to the Regal twins. We're all jacked as all get out. And then here comes Tub. I mean, it was super funny. The whole episode with Dak cut his hand off. It was wild. And I just remembered like how many vignettes we used to shoot in the TPC when we moved in there, and we had those game shows that we were doing. We had all this like really fun interactive stuff. And I'm kind of thinking, so there was a person that reached out to me that says he has a lot of those videos. He used to run our website. So maybe as like a fun bonus, we could put it up on the YouTube channel or something, because a lot of that stuff got missed by the NWLX channel that posted all of our TV shows. So I think it'd be really fun to go back and take a look at some of those like Magnum Minutes and some of those really fun videos,
See, Dak Draper probably copyrighted that, because he was the one that went out on his own and actually did that. I mean, that's how he really loved that job, Dak Draper. We'll talk with him soon about NWL and just his path to how he got there and what he's doing since. But he did those on his own. And so, Jake Durden did the same thing. A lot of those guys went on their own and just shot a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, it was funny when you talk about standing next to the Regals and Dak. It reminds me of it's sort of the opposite effect of on Back to School when Thornton Mellon says, if you want to look thin, hang out with fat people. So you did the opposite. If you want to look fat, hang out with the Regals and Dak Draper.
Right.
Right. I'm gonna look like complete garbage compared to those three.
Oh my God. I was like sitting there, and I mean, now it's kind of funny. Like I had a push-up contest with one of the wrestlers backstage at CSW and held my own against him. So I was like, things are I'm not too bad.
Who the hell was that? Let's call him out right now. Who did you say? No, what was their name? We need
I'm not gonna say.
Okay, because they're not gonna live that crap down. I'll tell you that.
But I mean, that guy was in decent shape. I mean, I couldn't hang with someone like the Regal Twins or anything, but he was in okay shape. And I called it off because I was in a suit, and I'm like, all right, we should stop now. But
I'll ask Jeremy White about it next time. I'm just kidding.
Did you hear when Jeremy and Ace and somebody else were like watching me eat pizza, and they were just shaking their heads at me? And I was like, you guys are such dicks, dude.
Well, that's a wrestling locker room right there.
Yeah. Speaking of wrestling locker rooms, I mean, there's a couple of news and tidbits I wanted to talk about. Before we went on the air, I talked to you about asking you if you had watched Elimination Chamber. Because
my response was what?
I'm not going to watch that shit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more vulgar than that, but we don't want to get, we don't want to have people turning off too much because we've already cursed a couple times on this.
Sure.
But yeah, I like the Bloodline storyline. I thought it was interesting that there seems to be a movement a la Bryan Danielson around Sami Zayn. I really enjoyed the match. I thought it was actually one of the better wrestling matches I've seen, and because it revolved around the story. And I realized something that you had said a long time ago. The hold for hold stuff is really great, right? Like Japanese, like, oh, look, they're trading holds, waka-duka-daka. But I pop more, and I've noticed I pop more in the last couple of years for matches that have a better story than they are in the ring. So it was just kind of funny. I can see myself getting older and wishing for the days where it was like, I would take the NWO like storyline or like Stone Cold or any one of these old storylines over like, Kenny Omega versus Takahashi, because they're like kicking the crap out of each other. And, because I saw the Will Ospreay match and the Kenny Omega match, which Meltzer gave 785 stars or whatever. It was okay. But I like the Sami Zayn Roman Reigns match more.
We've talked about this. I don't know. I think we talked about it at length here. I don't remember it because I say this so much to people that I forget where it stops. But Dave Meltzer, as much credit as I give him for being the first big time journalist in wrestling, and still the guy works his ass off. He does so many things that are great. The tributes and stuff that he does are fantastic. Totally. The history he remembers is awesome. But the one thing that I'll never understand and never agree with him on is the way he rates matches and the way he just completely takes dumps on like anything like storyline related.
Yeah.
He does not put over anything that is in a pay-per-view or a Raw back in the day. When we would do a segment that would be because this is what I loved back in the day, even when I was on the writing team in 2002. So let's say Scott Steiner comes in and he's going to have a program with Triple H, and Scott Steiner at that point had a really big problem with his foot, and then he had issues with just his body breaking down even at that point.
Yeah, drop foot, is that correct?
Yeah, drop foot. So it was basically like his boot would hold his foot back up like this because it would just go like this. It was a really strange injury for him to have, and obviously he's a athletic specimen and just was an awesome amateur wrestler. But anyway, at the time, it was like, we need to do stuff to not have these two touch until they're actually in a match. And so for that reason, we did a lot of camouflaging, which is what they did all the time back in the old school days. You do, I know people hate contract signings, but you do the push-up contest, you do the tug of war, you do, all this stuff that's like, arm wrestling competition.
Right.
You do these things that, they're not actually touching in the ring. They elongate the storyline, make it mean more when they actually get into the ring and wrestle each other. And that's what it used to be about. And Dave Meltzer hates all that. He hates all of the filler, which it's not, to me, filler. It's build up, which I think is good. But he wants fast-paced action all the time. If it's not a great in-ring match and sort of an exhibition of moves, then it's not a good match. And it's always bothered me with Dave, because as much as I think he gets a lot of credit, and deservedly so, I don't think he does very well on just like you talked about, sort of putting over the things that make a storyline like the Bloodline mean more.
And that seems to be a more recent illness with Mr. Meltzer, because he loved, like, one of my favorite matches of all time, Shawn Michaels Undertaker. Holy crap, what a match. I could still watch that match and be like, this is unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
Shawn Michaels from like 1997 to 2003. I mean, that era solidified him to me, like, as like, you know, when he came back with Triple H and started doing stuff. I mean, even after 03, because you're talking about Undertaker, then you had Ric Flair, then you had Jericho, you had all these things. But when I'm biased because the biggest match I saw him in was the Hell in the Cell at Bad Blood. Like that match was unbelievable. So he's had an unbelievable match with Undertaker, which a lot of people have great matches with both those guys.
Dude.
But yeah.
I mean, and he, you know, the famous Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair trilogy that he rated 5 stars and stuff. I think, I mean, I got to be honest, you know, there's been rumors swirling around about AEW, and I really think that his friendship with these guys, I'm not saying he's employed by AEW or anything like that, but I think his friendship with like the Young Bucks and all those guys, because I saw him at PWG shows in Reseda, and I think his friendship with those guys has changed his perspective on what makes a really good match. So now it is more so. I mean, he always rated the All Japan stuff 5 stars, all that kind of stuff, which those matches are different than the hold matches that we see now, which are more like gymnastics exhibitions, you know?
No, I agree. I mean, like, I know I hate beating this drum all the time, but unfortunately, whether it's, you know, whether it's like CNN or Fox News, whichever one you want to bash, it's like you get it from Dave Meltzer, and it's sort of played as gospel in the wrestling world.
Right.
And like I said, he's earned that to a degree, but it does bother me that he does let his personal biases go into all of those judgments that he puts in his newsletter, because frankly, I just think that he enjoys that kind. He enjoys Japanese wrestling. He doesn't need any kind of talking. He doesn't need any kind of sort of like flavor sizzle to the steak. He just wants the steak all the time, which to me makes the steak mean way less more, but we'll always agree to disagree. But I love storyline involvement. I think what's interesting about Sami Zayn now is that I think they were so ready to have Cody come back and just be the number one babyface. And now you got Sami Zayn, who's been built up so well through this bloodline storyline that it's like, you know, in a different world and not when Vince McMahon's alive, I could see Sami Zayn becoming like the champion at some point. But it's a part of me also it's hard for me as an old school wrestling fan to look at Sami Zayn and say this is a guy that should win a title, the biggest title in the land at WrestleMania. Although the crowd reaction in some ways sort of points that he should.
Yeah, speaking of which, you must be psychic. So some people are speculating that Vince McMahon is back in the creative seat. Now, I know you don't follow the current product as much, but there are a few indicators that at least lead me to believe he wasn't as of Elimination Chamber, the way some of the things were seemingly booked. Do you think, knowing Vince McMahon, is he back in the creative seat? Can he stay out of it?
Can he stay out of it? That'd be extremely hard, but I think you're right. There's indications of them hiring back all those people he let go of, before he left the first time. And they're still there, and they're still getting TV time for the most part.
Right.
Some things that he put into action before he left are now still out of action today. So, there's things that make you think maybe he's not involved. It's like I've said many times, the greatest book never going to be written is going to be what is really going on with the family, the relationships with Stephanie and Shane and Triple H and Vince, Linda even. It's like, what is going on? I have no idea. I guess he doesn't want to neuter Triple H again now. Maybe that's because of the board. Maybe that's because he's on the board still. But look, either way, it hasn't been knocking my socks off when I even read about the show. Sure. So it's not exactly, I don't think it's like, oh my gosh, Triple H is so involved, because it's great.
Right.
I've always sort of been, this isn't a knock on Triple H, because I don't really know if you've seen Triple H's capabilities to its fullest degree, but I always thought it was sort of misjudged that Triple H was like this godsend of a person in NXT, because at the time, if you really go back and look at it, they really just signed a bunch of awesome guys in the indies and put them in a bunch of awesome matches. And then, of course, everyone's like, this sucks, Triple H rules. And it just became like, okay, the same old story, underdog versus the the big time guy in charge, and Triple H I think got a ton of liberty thrown his way that way. But
well, because they never thought NXT was going to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be what it was. It was going to be a minor league system thing that sort of went around. Right. And of course, when you're signing up at the time, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, whatever, these guys,
Joe, all these,
there was a ton of dudes. Yeah. I mean, running a company at the time when NXT started, you see like the amount of like awesome indie guys were shrinking, like the guys who were making the rounds. So now it's sort of like college basketball. NBA takes all these guys after one and done in college and they go to the NBA. So now you have, the people that were sort of low to mid carders are now the main eventers on the indie scene now, because all the good indie guys are signed up or AEW or NXT or WWE, whatever one's on it. So it went down in quality, NXT did, and that was going to happen because they started with such a, comparatively speaking, great roster.
Yeah. And when you look at some of the things that they're trying to put in place, obviously, I think Nick Khan said recently that the deal selling WWE should be done in the next 3 months or something like that. Like, does that mean once this deal is done, if Vince doesn't have creative control, he's just going to walk away again? I don't see that happening.
Well, it depends on who buys it. Like, I mean, honestly, I think whoever they sell it to is going to want to keep them on as a retainer to be some kind of consultant or actually run the company, because at what point are you going to be able to find someone that's going to be able to understand this business? I mean, we saw it 20 years ago with Nitro. No one at TBS knew what the hell they were doing, even though they acquired this thing. Ted Turner wasn't going to, even though he was the big champion for it, he wasn't going to be the one running the things day to day. So he threw it over to all these sort of middle management, higher executives that have no idea about wrestling, which I even tell people today, they're even involved in sports. Like, getting involved in wrestling is nothing like anything else. I mean, I've been involved in baseball and football and other sporting things. Wrestling's nothing like it. It's like a traveling circus in a sports world. Right. Yes, I know everyone knows this that's listening, but it's just, how could you not either keep on Vince, Triple H, or someone from that family on to run the thing? Because at least for X amount, 5 years or whatever, until they can groom someone to take over, because no one's going to be able to be like, okay, thanks a lot, you gave us the car keys, see you later, Vince, forever. Because who's going to, I mean, who's even going to do that now? Like, I was talking about this with my friends, like, okay, yeah, everybody likes to crap on, the old guard, Terry Taylor, Bruce Pritchard, Johnny Ace, like all these guys, even Jim Cornette that doesn't want to do anything anymore. All these guys that are old fogies, don't know crap about what they're doing now. Who's going to, okay, so then who should be the top dog with Tony Khan? Who should be the guy that, should Christopher Daniels, no knock on him because I like him personally, but is Christopher Daniels the guy that should be the head of talent relations like JR back in the day? No, they're apples to oranges. I mean, because they come from different backgrounds. They don't have nearly the diversification that these guys did back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I don't know. There's not like a breeding ground of executives for just wrestling like there was when the territories died out, and they're all basically old and dying now. So, Nick Khan, he was a Hollywood agent. So he's really good at pumping up. I saw these come and go, like the Nick Khans, Gabe. I saw them. Stu Snyder, who helped facilitate buying WCW. These guys they come in as hired guns to fluff the sale up, cut some fat from the roster, and the staffing of the company, get it ready for a sale. They're not the ones that are going to be like, here's what I think we should do creatively, marketing, promotional, all this stuff. So who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but I think they'd have to retain them.
Yeah, I would say so too. And speaking of old territory guys, and then we'll get to our we'll talk about our interview with Rob, or your interview with Rob Schamberger. So thoughts on Jerry Jarrett. So Jerry Jarrett passed away recently. I'm a big mark of the that style of wrestling, the old territory wrestling, especially Memphis, especially in the last couple of years, become a huge Memphis fan, NWA, all that kind of stuff. What do you think, first of all, of what Jerry, because he was largely heralded as a genius. When WCW needed help, call Jerry Jarrett. When WWF needs help, call Jerry Jarrett. When it looked like Vince was going away, blah, blah, blah. What do you think about Jerry Jarrett's impact on wrestling? What did you think of his booking personally, if you ever saw a lot of his stuff?
I thought he was great. I mean, he was in an era where, look, as much as I like Bruce Pritchard and I love his impression of Jerry Jarrett,
Yeah.
where he's actually a bumbling Southern man. Well, you got the chicken salad. I love that. But I mean, when you really step back, and even Bruce put a picture of him and Jerry up. Obviously, when he passed away, Bruce is not making fun of it now. But I mean, back in that era, to do what he did in Memphis, which is not the largest town in the world, and to take, like, he basically did what Paul Heyman and all these other people are really good at through the years. He took very little and made it into something. He tried to accentuate the positives and, downplay the negatives. There's so many examples, but one that sticks out obviously is Kamala, when they took this guy that was a nothing, Sugar Bear Harris, and made him into Kamala, and shot. I love the stories of hearing that they shot the vignettes in his backyard and all this stuff.
Yeah.
That was sort of a
coming out of the bush.
Yeah. That encapsulates the entire Memphis territory, though. I think they just did what they could. It made it entertaining. Meltzer should have hated Memphis wrestling because it was complete a ton of song and dance, and I loved all the the Andy Kaufman stuff and everything that was taking place in that era. Jerry and Kaufman, Jerry and Lawler, and they all were sort of in and out of each other's lives. They'd take breaks, you've heard all the booking philosophies where, they'd flip every 6 months, like Dundee was involved too. Yep. I just thought he did such a great job with that territory, and people you think Kansas City fans love Kansas City wrestling. I mean, Memphis fans, that's lifeblood down there.
Jerry Lawler, I don't think would be even where he is now, or would have gotten the opportunity with WWE, which propelled him to where he is now, had it not been for his popularity in Memphis. I mean, he is literally royalty there. He
is. He's ran for mayor several times. I know he's never won or gotten close to it, but I mean, you got the king of. He called himself the king in the land where Elvis was from. So or lived anyway. So yes, Jerry Lawler and Jerry Lawler is not an athletic specimen or anything like that, but he was made into a huge star down there.
Huge.
Jerry Jarrett I can see, and I understand, and Vince was like this too. It sort of shocks me. If Andy Kaufman would have went to the Vince McMahon we knew and not his father, I think Vince would have scooped up Andy Kaufman in 2 seconds. I mean, this is the guy that put Snooki on WrestleMania, so he would have done it with Kaufman, but his father had nothing to do with that. And to his credit, Jerry Jarrett was like, oh my God, like a Hollywood star wants to do this. Yes, let's let it. And I still, to this day, I don't know how anyone could say there was a bigger sort of angle in wrestling than that, really, because
I completely agree.
That's a huge part of wrestling. And that was one that I always tell my friends. My friends' dads would say, that wrestling sucks. It's all fake, except Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler. And I mean, I heard that for decades. And I finally had to tell that guy, they've come out after Man on the Moon came out. That's not real. They still believed it was real.
But the mythos of that is so strong, though, that they were even talking about how Jim Carrey was, kayfabe on the set, you know what I mean? And he
was super into role playing, doing that. And,
right.
Yeah,
so and that, him and Lawler got snippy with, it became larger than life. I mean, they were on Letterman, and they Kaufman was spewing obscenities. And I mean, this was a really, really big, it's one of my favorite angles of all time, top 3.
It has to be.
It just incredible. And that's what actually got me into Memphis wrestling, and actually showed me that Jerry Lawler, like you said, I don't think he's ever worked out a day in his life.
I think he proudly says he hasn't. I don't think he's just kept in good enough shape. I mean, he's not in horrible shape or anything, but for a guy that's big, but I've heard the same thing about Kurt Hennig. They said Kurt Hennig never worked out. That's what they said. That dude
was all.
I know, but they claim that he was not a big gym guy. But anyway, I don't know. It's a territory that obviously will never be replicated, and for the size of the town it was and what Jerry Jarrett did, and it's been talked about since his death. But I mean, if you really look at it, Memphis, huge deal. Then they get into NWA TNA, and that's still in some form or fashion still around today. And they've been involved in multiple professional wrestling companies that lasted a very long time. So no matter what you think of his southern drawl or whatever, he was a force to be reckoned with. And sadly, outside of Vincent Kennedy McMahon and Bill Watts, I'm sure that I'm missing some, but there's just that era of guys are gone. They're almost gone.
I mean, well, hopefully Jeff Jarrett. I say what you want about Jeff. He was NyQuil for me when he was a wrestler. I couldn't stand him, but
he's
you know
getting a little bit more love now because of his podcasting and stuff. But yes, he was always sort of like he's getting a lot of love now. But yes, I agree with you.
But he's in great shape. He can work. He can bump his ass off. Great working punch, and I think he's keeping that spirit of like entrepreneurship alive, that he got from his father. But yeah, definitely, I think a big loss to wrestling. So, Jerry Jarrett's definitely, and I mean, like you said, Vince McMahon, people turned to him when the chips were down to possibly manage or to possibly bolster or to do something. He was so respected universally in wrestling, which is a hard thing to do. A lot of people, although they didn't pay crap from what I remember.
That was obviously one of the issues with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that's why he never wanted to work with Jeff Jarrett, because he thought he was treated poorly in Memphis.
Right.
A lot of people have that. A lot of people say that about Kansas City. A lot of people say that about Dallas. A lot of people say, they were basically starving, living on beans and, nothing.
Beans and taters.
That's all they would eat back then. And it sucked. I'm sure it was horrible for the guys that were starving while Jerry Jarrett's talking about his mansion on the lake.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But that's I don't know. I guess that's sort of America in a nutshell.
Yeah, you know what? Totally. All right. Well, Chris, let's talk about your interview this week, and then we'll get to it.
Well, this week I got to have a nice long chat with a guy that I met about almost 15 years ago now. And he is the WWE artist. I call him Rob Schamberger. Now, Rob was a guy that I had no idea who he was until I did my documentary, and we talk about this, about how he just walked up to me with his girlfriend at the time and was like, hey, would check this out. I'm Rob. Bob Geigel sent me here. And he explains to me in the interview that Bob Geigel actually asked him to come to the documentary premiere as his guest because he had talked to Bob about doing this side project because he knew Bob Geigel's daughter. I'm trying to remember. There was a connection there, and you'll hear about it in the interview. But he came, and that was the first time I saw him. Then he started coming to Metro Pro shows, and I said, hey, bring your artwork and sell it in the corner. I thought it was really cool. He did really great work of wrestling, loved wrestling, did other things too. He had like pinup girl like type things from the 50s that he would paint and some other things. But then it transitioned purely into just wrestling. And now he has been sort of he's a contracted worker. He's not a full-time employee of WWE, but he is basically known as the WWE artist now. And he has been with them for over a decade. And we talk about how he got to where he got and how he started with Metro Pro and in Kansas City. He's a Kansas City guy. So it was cool to hear his perspective of meeting Bob Geigel, going to his house, going through the ranks of the independents, going to some other, sort of cons at the time, like, Comic-Con type things, and then to get where he's at now. And just, it's just cool. And we have some really cool stories about the pizza parties he used to throw after Metro Pro shows and what those entailed. So it was good talk with Rob. Love talking to him.
All right. So let's get to that interview with Rob Schamberger, and we'll see you on the other side.
It's the worst territory.
I am here now with a longtime friend. I was thinking about this the other day. I've known this guy since at least 2010. So we're working on a decade and a half almost. He has gone from a guy that I saw at local shows in Kansas City to now he's basically I call him the WWE artist for the biggest wrestling company in the world. He is Rob Schamberger. Rob, thanks for joining me, man.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Pretty
been
good.
Too long since we've been together.
I know. Rob, we're going to talk about this at some point, but when I first met you, and then you got involved in becoming a part of the shows at Metro Pro in Kansas City, 10, 15 years ago, you became the guy that allowed all of the people that were great and not so great to come to your house and or studio really afterwards to have a pizza party after our wrestling shows. And that's how you ingratiated yourself with most of the people in Kansas City. So I thank you for that again.
Oh, you're welcome. I inebriated and made fat a lot of wrestlers in the Midwest.
Oh, yeah. I do remember some wrestlers eating pizza and be like, I hate myself. And then they just eat more pizza. Yeah.
They hated themselves before the pizza.
and some of them still hate themselves. Yes. But Rob, I'll never forget the first time I met you, because it was when I was doing the documentary for Central States, and I remember we were doing the private, it wasn't a private showing, but the sort of the public showing, I guess it was, of the documentary at Memorial Hall. And you and your wife walked in, and you had a comic book. And at that point, there was so much stuff going on that day. Like, it was hard. My head was spinning. But like, you showed me your comic book, and it was this awesome illustrated comic book that you were putting together or working on. I want you to talk about that. But I just remember it had Bob Geigel in it, and a lot of the old stars. And I was like, man, this guy knows his history. Like, give me some background on that comic.
Yeah, I got into wrestling a little bit later in life. Like, I didn't grow up on it, because like I grew up with a single mom, and we had one TV, and she didn't want to watch wrestling, right? And it was actually my stepfather, when she remarried, and I was about 18. He had gone to Central States back in the 60s and 70s at Memorial Hall. Mm-hmm. And so he was flipping through the channels and landed on Nitro, with Ric Flair doing a promo, and it's like all of a sudden I got it. And he had seen Rick, like in the 70s, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I understand what this is all about, and became a fan that way. But I was also really into comic books and wanting to make a graphic novel about, like, a fictionalized version, but based around pro wrestling in Kansas City during that time. Mm-hmm. Kind of my pitch at the time was that this was the Mad Men of pro wrestling. Yeah. And so I did a ton of research, and I was talking about it with my soon-to-be mother-in-law, and she was like, oh, my college roommate was Bob Geigel's daughter.
Wow, small world.
Yeah, Shots was her name. And so she reached out to Shots, who then reached out to Bob. And Bob and Vera had us all over to talk wrestling. And it was just amazing. Like, you've been to Bob's house. Like,
oh, yeah.
You know what that was like. Like, he gave me the tour of the basement with all the photos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, like, explain that to people that have never been there, never will go there now at this point, obviously. But yeah. I mean, like, so what I tell people about Bob Geigel, and anyone that talks crap on Bob Geigel, which I know that people that do, obviously, that at the highest levels on down, but Bob Geigel was just a super awesome, normal guy who was a great athlete and got into wrestling. But I swear to God, he lived in the same house for 50 to 60 years, and I think it was decorated at the first when he moved in, and it never changed. And he just reminded me of my grandfather. He did.
Yeah. And before I forget, you should totally, at some point in the future, interview Bob's daughters. They're really all about keeping his legacy going.
Oh, that's
I don't know
awesome.
If you've touched base with them.
I have not.
I can put you in touch.
I met at least one of them at the premiere, and during that whole time when I was interviewing him, and his wife was great, and they were all just so sweet people. And of course, like, sometimes, I've learned going through life that sometimes when you meet people in their older age, they seem to be nicer than they maybe were when they were younger, because, right. I was like, why doesn't everybody love this guy? Because he's so nice. And then you find out, oh, he was a horrible person when he was 40 or whatever. But I didn't see that about Bob. Like, everyone, like, I think he was pretty steady as they go. I mean, I think I think the only negative thing you could really say about Bob is he was just a simple guy, which isn't necessarily
he was
a negative.
Not fancy.
Not at all.
No, he had like stains on his shirt and everything, like didn't care. But yeah, like talking about the basement, it was like a walkout basement. And like my mother-in-law had told him, like, hey, Rob's researching, he wants to ask you questions. And Bob's like, oh yeah, he can ask anything. So like while he's like showing me like all the walls are covered in framed photographs of every wrestler he ever worked with. Yes. And all the big moments from his career.
It was cool.
And he's given a story about each and every one, right? And we get through the first wall, and then we're about to get to like the sliding doors that walk out to his backyard. And I was like, I know nowadays, like, they work through a lot of the spots for a match. Like, what was it like back then? Like, did you just call it in the ring? How was it? And he opens up his blinds and he says, I grow tomatoes. Like,
he was he did jump around, very
kayfabe.
ADD. Yeah.
Yeah, still very kayfabe. And I was like, okay, like I learned a lot just from that encounter, right? Like I didn't push or anything. I'm like, oh, okay, so like guys from that time, they just don't talk about that. And they're like, okay, cool.
He also is just the kind of guy that like he didn't take himself very seriously, like too seriously anyway.
No, I'm sure he was amazed that I was even doing this thing. I'm sure he was that way with you too. Like, who cares, right?
He was. But he did have. I think he liked the fact that he got to. When I talked to him, man, he was in his 80s. I'm not maybe 84. I want to say he passed away at the age of 90ish. So I want to say he was 84 or so, and he was. I think he was happy to. Give me a lot of information. A lot of times when you're that age, of course, I've met a lot of people I've interviewed, and they're happy to get their legacy down in some form or fashion like that. And he was totally into that. And he had a lot of opinions about people because I was like, hey, do you have the number for this guy? And he would have several guys. He's like, don't talk to him. He's basically a piece of crap. So don't interview him. I don't want him part of this. I'm like, yes, sir. Because at that time he was the man. Yeah.
Yeah. So like as we go around with the photographs, I could see there was one of Ric Flair, and I was like, I had read Rick's biography where he just totally buried Bob, and I was like, oh, I want to hear this. I want to hear this. So we finally get to it, and it was Bob and Rick and some dude in a suit from the first Starrcade, and Bob says, and here I am with a writer from the New York Times who was doing a story about Starrcade, and that was really great. And just completely moved on.
Oh, and there's some other guy. Anyway,
yeah. I love that.
Yeah, he did not sell for Ric Flair. No.
And otherwise, just told stories about like here and there, and his wife Vera actually talked more than Bob did, but we stayed in touch. And Bob like called me out of the blue to say, "Hey, this guy's doing this documentary. I want you to be my guest."
Cool.
So that's what got me to come to that screening, and then met you.
I had no idea that was the connection there. That's cool. Maybe you told me that night and it just went in there, went out the other at that moment. But that's
you had a few other things going on.
Yeah, it was that was a stressful night to make sure everything worked out. But it was cool to see you there because, I actually did not grow up. My parents were not big wrestling fans, neither were my grandparents. So I didn't grow up going to Kansas City wrestling at all. The way that I first met Bob, as I've talked about before, is I saw him at the Woodlands. And I had heard about him a lot. And I don't know if you ever spent any time up there. You're a little younger than me. But when that first opened, I went up to the racetrack, and it was just awesome to see all the old wrestlers there because they were so easy. I would get autographs from them every time I was up there. And that really made me want to do more later in life when I got a little bit older and a career that could allow me to do that. But did you ever spend time with anybody else besides Bob? Did you ever see anybody else at the Woodlands or any of those guys?
No, I never went. And again, like I didn't really get into things until like my late teens, early 20s. So like not around that time, but like as my career progressed, like pretty much everyone now, like obviously did a lot with Harley. Larry Hennig and his family became real close, still very close with the family. Because of the nature of what I do with like now, like doing all these portraits of the wrestlers, whether it be through WWE or just the word of what I do getting out there, like I've gotten in touch with pretty much everyone at this point.
Everyone that's left, it's sad when I look back and see the documentary. I mean, there's honestly maybe 3 or 4 people that are still around, and it's horrible. But I mean, I talked to Mike George. I mean, he's still around. He's still working at a casino.
Yeah.
Living in the Bob Geigel tradition. He'll have a job for life because he was like he's a big star, and everybody of that age knows who Mike George is. But they're just all gone, and that's why when you're doing this, a a lot of times we talk to people like yourself or people that are just associated with it in any way, because the Central States really, the only people that are left are the guys left in the final like 5 years of the territory. We're talking 85 to 86 to maybe 90, 91. And, the Giannettis. And I have talked to Marty Jannetty. He has not come on yet. He didn't like the name of the podcast, The Worst Territory in the World, because he took exception with it, and he actually loved Bob Geigel. It was interesting. We had a big email back and forth, and, of course, anyone in wrestling that knows about Marty Jannetty's life, we know how that is. But, it's been a crazy ride trying to find people to do this. And Akio Sato's still around. There's some people still around, but it's just not, it's hard to find them now.
Yeah, and the first time I met Shawn Michaels, I brought up the Kansas City connection, and he just kind of like stared at me like, yeah, that's a place I worked. He didn't have much more to say about it. And, Jeff Jarrett, I think, did a cup of tea here and had, in passing, nice things to say about Bob.
Yeah. Did you spend a lot of time with Harley? Did you spend a lot of time with him at all?
More his people. His faculties were pretty much gone by the time I met him.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, he was confined to a wheelchair.
Each time I met him was the first time.
Okay, yes, and that's how it was his final years of life, and that definitely. I feel like when we interviewed him in 2008 or 2009, that was definitely, still a good time for him to remember everything. I was just curious. Yeah. So. Let's move on to how you got involved in this. So what actually happened after that when I met you the first time at the Central States premiere at the documentary? Then I know, we started running Metro Pro Wrestling in Kansas City at our first show at Memorial Hall. Don't know if you were at that one.
I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you got heavily involved with this after that, because obviously you're a great artist and everybody really likes your work. So it was great for me to have you come to the shows, because, people wanted to buy your stuff, and it was like an added side bonus for me to have you there anyway. Talk about that transition of meeting Geigel and doing that into sort of slowly planting the seeds of what you're doing now.
Yeah, I did a crowdfunder through Kickstarter to start a project of like painting every world champion from all the major promotions. And I raised like $20,000 off that. So I was able to like quit my job and focus on this full time. Yeah. Which gave me like more time to get involved with you guys. And also is like a lot of synergy. Like, I think like in the later days of that crowdfunding was when you had me in the ring, and that bastard Adam Pierce destroyed one of my paintings.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite segments of all time.
Loved it.
One of my favorite segments I've used. Most of the people listening to this probably have never seen Metro Pro Wrestling, but at the time, it's on YouTube, and Rob was at that point an unknown, except locally, but. We had a segment where he did a mural, and it was obviously a ripoff that's been done in wrestling several times through the years, including with Jerry Lawler and The Ultimate Warrior.
That was the one we used as the reference, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think Adam or Strider wore a hat that night to cushion the blow. But no, that was you did an awesome mural, and it was destroyed in the ring as he took it across the head of Michael Strider, and it was an awesome way to get you more attention, but also just an awesome angle, like continuation.
Yeah, and then we had another one of Pierce destroyed a few years later. I think Pierce himself destroyed that one over the head of, like, I don't know, was it one of the King brothers?
You're going to say the Mancinis? No, the King brothers, yes. Yes, I think it was.
Or Sterling, yeah.
I think it was. It wasn't Sterling, I believe. But, yeah, your artwork has been involved in...
Sterling wouldn't sell for me either.
No, he would not. He'd probably hate you. I'm just going on a limb.
I think I'm the only person he gets along with.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I knew there was one.
It's me.
Yeah, I just thought it was cool the way that you went from the corner of like into Turner Rec Center in Kansas City, Kansas, to selling your artwork. And I'm sure at the time, like you said, the Kickstarter helped, but then, you'd make some supplemental stuff at shows like that. And then, it just, I don't know, you were all in, man. And it's cool that you were because, a lot of people would not have been. So you were all in and went up to, where you are today. I mean, what was that process like? How did you go from, selling at independent shows, and then you started getting slowly involved in other shows around the area, and then you go to where you're at now?
Yeah, I would reach out to, it was more like other wrestling type conventions and the museum up in Waterloo, instead of like other indie shows, because like I knew you, I trusted you, but I didn't know about other shows, right?
Yeah, it's tough to trust anyone. Yeah.
So it was at the museum in Waterloo. I met Jim Ross and Jerry Briscoe, and Jim wanted to sign me on the spot, and I was like, I'm not quite ready. Like there was like business stuff I wanted to get in line first because I had a vision for how I wanted my component to play out. So it was like a few months later, SmackDown was coming to Kansas City, and I reached out to Jim to see if he could pass my information along because I was doing a Make-A-Wish fundraiser gallery event.
Okay.
And he did, but also contacted Triple H's office and said, like, we need to actually work with this guy. So a couple executives reached out to me and were like, here's our plan for how we want to work with you. My thing was like, I need to own my work, and they actually went for that.
That's hard to get. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like anywhere in the art world. It's kind of a sweetheart deal. And, like they debuted me at WrestleMania 30. Like that was my public, was at WrestleMania Access for that. My first backstage thing was a few months earlier, and it was actually the week that Punk walked out.
Okay.
So that was my
memorable.
House show here in Kansas City was like the first time I worked with everyone. Like most of the wrestlers all knew me already, and several members of the staff even, because of social media. And we've just kind of built it up from there. Like I've got the YouTube series now, weekly series of like showing how I make the paintings.
Yeah, those are really cool.
Thanks. And do a lot of events with them, like WrestleMania every year, and go to different shows now. We get the prints signed by the wrestlers and sell those, and that does really well. But it's just been like nonstop ever since for like almost a decade now. I gotta
be honest. Like when you first started this, I thought it was so awesome, and I was like such a great break for you, and I was very happy for you. But I'm like,
you tried talking me out of it.
After working there, well, I tried. I think probably going full time would have been a downfall, possibly. Like as far as like you're working for them, only because that was just my experience, and I was like, it's really hard for me to tell anybody I like to fully do this and like change their life because they might change everything. But so much has changed over the last since I was in 20 years. So I understand.
Very different place.
I mean, It's when I was there, it was still a remnant of a family-run company, now it's very different, it seems like. But one thing that cracks me up though about the whole thing is the two of my favorite guys that I had the honor to work with there were Jerry Briscoe and Jim Ross, and they both had different roles when I was there from each other. But the fact that I think so many people hear stuff about JR being cranky JR or whatever, and then they don't necessarily know everything about Jerry. And the fact that JR and Jerry were both on your side immediately says a lot about you. I mean, like, I think a lot of people would be sort of shocked to hear that JR was championing some guy that was not with the company and wasn't going to be just to use your art. I mean, that was sort of shocking, I got to say.
Yeah, he was really cool to me from the beginning. And Jerry, like just such a sweetheart. And I didn't even know until like at WrestleMania 30 how highly he was regarded within the company, because he was not very active anymore by the time I came in. But I was at we were in like the friends and family room for Mania, and he was walking by with some other people I didn't know at the time, and I was talking with I think it was like Hornswoggle and maybe one of the Usos, and I'm like, oh, hold on, guys, and I run over to say hey to Jerry, and we talk for a while, and I come back, I'm like, hey, sorry about that, like Jerry's a friend, and they're like, never apologize for talking to him. He is the man. Like, just like very highly regarded. Because at one point, like he was Vince's right hand.
Oh my gosh, when I was there, it was him and Pat were, they were inseparable from Vince, and Jerry just being not only just where he was politically, but also the fact that he could. I mean, I have so many stories I really can't tell, but like stories that I can't. I mean, this is a guy that could like. I'll never forget this one time. I'll tell just a version of this. Like, so him and Bruce Pritchard always went around and traveled together. They hung out together after hours, after shows or whatever, when we were staying in town at the hotel. And this one time, because I was low man in the totem pole when I was on the writing team when I first started, and they were like, hey, country, go get us some Whataburgers, and I'll take a number 4, and I want a Diet Coke, or whatever. So I got both of them, and I came back, and I just remember I walked into, I guess it was Bruce's hotel room, and the door was open, and someone was like, come in. And I walk in, not knowing that I'm going to be attacked. And I look at the TV, and their big screen TV in the hotel room, just like action scene of a porno on Spectravision. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then Bruce walks out of the bathroom like, hey, big country. And then all of a sudden, Jerry jumps behind me and puts me in like, a chicken wing. And, and they just started screwing with me. And like, I'm a larger guy, but like, I can't do anything with Jerry Briscoe. So he could have done anything to me in there, and he didn't, thank God. But I mean, but he's an awesome dude. He's just a fun-loving guy, and like I love that he does a podcast, and when he does like social media updates where he's real sarcastic and smartass. I love those. I mean, they're great.
My favorite story with him, I think I can tell this, was after one of the museum events in Waterloo. There was a gentleman's club next door. Yeah. So that's where we all were, because it was a wrestling show, and a bunch of us had like put down money in front of Jerry and sat him in the front row, and so this girl was giving him a public dance, and she was like right on him, and his chair broke.
Oh my God.
Like he was leaning back and the damn chair broke. And so he instinctively reached up to try to grab something to stop his fall. And the only thing he could grab were what was in his face. And we asked the girl about it afterwards, like, oh, do we need to pay you more? Like, she's like, oh no, Jerry's a sweetheart.
He's known here. He's got his own table. No. Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, he was falling. He was trying to obviously help himself. And he did. Man, no, there's look, as much that job full time, even for you, I'm sure, is like so hectic and chaotic and nerve-wracking and stressful and all combined in one, that I understand when they have off time, which is very seldom, that they go do whatever they want, because it is like it is a grind. And I tell people this all the time: working for Vince McMahon is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because you'll never outwork your boss. So it's like you have to be, you can never bitch or complain about anything, because this dude who is 40 years older than you is doing it better. So I mean, it sucks, but it's great. But it sucks.
It's a bit different now. Like even like before Vince's role, whatever changed, like it was getting a little bit easier. Like there was a case at like a WrestleMania where, and for so many of us, I was talking about this with one of the production guys, like they don't specifically tell us we have to work that hard. We kind of do it to ourselves.
Yeah. It's out of fear,
Yeah, or even just like, oh, this is what's expected of me, right?
Sure.
And like you're constantly wanting to prove yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But there was like a couple of the merchandise guys for WrestleMania. There was just so much work for them. They were just staying at the stadium working, and like one of them was just taking a nap behind the boxes, and someone took a picture. And when Stephanie was doing a walkthrough, she's like, it's amazing you guys are able to like get all this done. And they showed her the picture, and she's like, well, this has to change. Like we can't have this happening. So like, they started making changes that made it so that the job was a little more doable. But there's still a lot of us there that are working nonstop. Like I've just in the past couple months, like slowed down a little bit. Like a decade in, I finally feel like I can, take a day off occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming from a whole different approach here. So you're not full staff, but you're probably always thinking, when you're working for the top company, you're always worried that someone's going to try to take your spot, just like a wrestler or anybody else in that company. So you of course need to keep up your level of work all the time. And that was, when I worked there, my parents called it the lost years because when I did come home, I was on the phone constantly because again, I was a writer's assistant when I first got there. So for the writing team, so everyone was like, I'm getting calls from Michael Hayes at 3 a.m. Hey, write this down. I need this tomorrow. I'm like, okay, dude, good night. And so that, you're constantly working, and which it's a young man's job, man. I'm glad I could not do it now in my 40s, but in my 20s, it was doable. But I get your point. Definitely.
It's nonstop. And luckily, like my wife is as motivated as I am, and she comes to a lot of the events with me. So when like if you're like married or dating someone that's outside of this, trying to explain it to them,
no way,
they're thinking like, what's this guy actually doing? It's like, no, I'm just there and on all the time.
You are obviously cheating on them, and you're not coming home and that's why you're doing that. I thought that all the time. There's so many times with just doing like local stuff like NWL when I worked here. That was another grind, and I'm gone every weekend, late night, coming home at 4 a.m. from St. Louis, and it's all wrestling related because it's travel and all this stuff. And it's like, if I didn't have a wife already, first of all, I've always said like, you'll never get married or anything or have a real girlfriend if you get into the wrestling business and don't already have one, because there's no time to do it. So, but yeah, like it makes everyone else thinking like, what are they really doing? I'm like, well, believe me, if I could be home, I would. I'm going to sleep in my own bed. But
yeah, and I'm only traveling once or twice a month. Like, there have definitely been times when like I was doing the conventions as well, where I'd be home a couple days out of the week. Like that I cut back just because like I didn't feel like I was doing good art, which ultimately this is what it's all about.
Sure.
But yeah, like Friday I'm driving down up to Champaign, Illinois to work a house show and coming back. It's constant and still trying to get everything hammered out for what, if anything, I'm doing with WrestleMania this year. And that's something that has not changed. The last minute nature of everything.
Oh yeah. No, that's, it's
live entertainment.
I've come to find out that that's basically entertainment at the highest levels, always like that. Whether it's Saturday Night Live or WWE or whatever, it's like the last second edits and second guessing of everything is always prevalent. So it's hard to get past that. And it's very annoying to those working with it, but you just learn to accept and move on. That's just
what's amazing is like I've done stuff outside of WWE, outside of wrestling, and on the production end and the logistics end, they really are the best.
Oh yeah.
Like I just did like a major Hollywood thing, and the logistics were a nightmare. And I'm telling them like, no, do it this way. And they're like, oh, that'd be great. Like,
yeah.
Like, but it's just like the nature of what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a grind all the time, and you get used to it after a while, which is why some people can stay there for 30 years or 40 years or whatever. So you talk about the quality of work that's an issue, because I understand that from what I'm doing now. So it's sort of like you always have to worry about the marketing of your stuff and doing live shows and events and all that stuff, but also, yes, by the way, the center, the nucleus of everything I'm doing is the work I'm actually doing. So I know it's hard to balance all that. How do you move forward now after being there, like you said, a decade in? What do you do? Like, do you find yourself always trying to find a new version of your art, or to like make it different, or, because I would always worry, like, everything's constantly changing. So have you had to deal with that as an artist?
Yeah, it's definitely top of mind for me with every single painting, but also, like, a lot of artists have like a distinctive style and medium that they work with, and that can get old, like that can fall out of fashion. I'm constantly experimenting with different approaches, different mediums, all of that, and like studying what a lot of art, like throughout history, and what's happening in the contemporary area right now as well. Like constantly like trying to soak all that up like a dry sponge, and put that into each new piece that I'm doing to try to keep it fresh. And now that like I'm spending longer on my art, it's given me a lot of freedom to like really be a lot more intentional with all of it.
Yeah.
So like the stuff I've been doing in the last month is like light years beyond what I was doing when you first met me.
I asked that question because I've noticed your art has changed. I mean, which is going to happen anyway. You get more refined. You see what works, whatever. But I've also seen it just from a creative standpoint. Some of the stuff that you worked on, that was really hot and super popular and everyone loved like a decade ago. You're switching that up, and I've noticed like the different elements that you've put in your stuff. And I think it's cool because you have to be that way, especially there. Like I'm always like thinking like, what does Rob have to go through as an artist in the world of WWE? Because just being a office worker or a video editor there is difficult enough, but I mean, it's constantly. I'm like I said, I'm sure you're constantly, like you said, you can take a little breath now, but you're always like, I have to be good.
Lovingly hated, both within the office and in the art world, because they give me total freedom.
That's
which
great.
I'm sure is just blowing your mind hearing, right? But like,
I think
there's
you
no
have the upper hand.
No revisions.
You have the upper hand because you're basically an independent contractor, right? So I mean, you can.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome that you have stayed that way because, in other aspects, then when I know people that do other side projects from them, they eventually, it seems like, become a staff member, and the fact that you haven't had to do that, I think, is great for you.
Yeah, and I was last year's Mania. I was talking for a while with a guy on the creative team, creative services, and he was like, occasionally in like the company chat, we'll be like, here we are, like working on our third revision meeting, and Rob's probably drinking a latte and just getting started for the day. And I'm like, oh, I drink tea.
No, I get it. I understand. Like when you're in the damn belly of the beast, you're like, screw everybody else and have to do this. I totally understand that. But
they treat me awesome. I think like it was also kind of the thinking that like, oh, I'm a Triple H guy, so I kind of get some leeway that way. And then also a lot of the time, like, because I'm definitely like not there at Stanford, like most of the company that I've never even been there.
That's amazing. You've never been there.
Which everyone tells me keep it that way.
I think it is. I think they might be like, you know what, Rob, actually been thinking, here's an office for you right here. Why don't you just go ahead and tell your wife, tell her you're moving up here.
But like, so it's the road crew that I work with, which, it's a totally different ideology, right? Like road team versus home team.
Oh yeah.
So like those guys I get along with super great, but also like unless I'm there, they're not thinking of me, and I'm not at the office, so they're all in the middle of the 15 things that are being asked of them that day. So I kind of just get to steer clear of all that.
You're in the purgatory of both. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Although you're more road guy than home base guy, which I always thought was a little bit more. Yeah, the road guys, the road team of the WWE always had more. And now it's hard ass work. Don't get me wrong, but they had more freedom because they're not, they're not in front of everybody, so they can as long as they're in that world of as long as you get the job done, I don't give a crap. Which is good. That's a good way to be.
It's the polo shirt guys versus the suit guys.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So before I wrap up here, let me ask you, like, who are some of the guys, old and young, some of the workers or whoever you've painted or whoever you've dealt with that you've mentioned JR and Jerry, not them, but other guys that you've come across with that you've really hit it off with as far as maybe just your paintings, but also just being in the world that you're in and really enjoy their company that everybody would know?
I'll tell you, like, the people I got closest with were the Metro Pro crew. Like those after parties.
Oh, yeah.
It was just so much fun because we did it for several years.
And I don't know what spurred you to do that because, like, you obviously were taking your own money and you were making some money at the show, but I mean, it was under no reason that you should be paying for any pizza or beer for anybody. But you did that, and that was so cool. And I was always worried that some of the guys wouldn't appreciate it. And that was what made you do that? You just liked them so much, or like, yeah, most people wouldn't do that.
I think Matt Jackson is still planning to pay me back. But
no, he's not.
No, he's not. It was at first like I had this space. Like there was an early show I was at where we all went to the Quaff afterwards.
Yes, and was that the dance off with ACH and Iceman? Okay, yeah.
Which gave me the idea to pitch you for Iceman becoming the dance battle champion.
Which was a good gimmick for him for a while.
It was great. My mom made that trophy for him.
Oh, yeah. I guarantee Howard has that on his mantle or somewhere.
It's the best title he ever had. And I was like, man, this is a lot of fun. And then it was like, well, I've got this studio. And yeah, like when I was selling stuff at the show, I did feel a little bad because there were definitely shows I was the one hoovering all the money off the floor.
Well, I mean, come on. To be fair, these guys would have a new T-shirt every month. So I'm like, at some point, you're gonna run out of T-shirt sales, buddy.
Being an artist is a very solitary existence. Like I'm just in my room painting by myself, and I was like, hey, I could pay a few people to be my friends.
It's like a fraternity.
Yeah. So it just became like a thing, and it was a ton of fun. And I think it was like maybe like the second one. Pete Madden pulled me aside, and he's like, "This kind of thing doesn't happen often in wrestling." Where like there's a regular place where people get together and just have fun off the clock. It just doesn't happen. He's like, so really appreciate this while it's happening. And I did my best to do that. And there'd be times where there'd be just a few people, and then other times like almost the whole roster would come over. I think it was the first time Magic Man messaged me and was like,
oh god.
Hey, he was like, do you want me to bring my bag of tricks? And like not knowing him, not really knowing anyone yet, I was thinking he was talking cocaine.
Well, that's what that would be my first assumption. Would be something drug related. Yes.
And I was like, no, but you can bring a bag of dicks. And he's like, no problem. So he walks up the stairs and he opens up his bag full of dildos.
That does not shock me that Magic Man could produce such a thing.
And he was like handing them out to like Lucy and Miss Natural and
oh my god.
like Magic Man, just like having him around. Like there was one time when I had my studio in the River Market, he had disappeared, and we were like, "Where is he?" And Mike Crace, the referee, goes out, and Magic Man was standing in the middle of the street there, holding a rubber chicken by the neck, and Mike's like, "What? What the hell are you doing, Magic?" And he's like, "Choking my chicken."
Good Lord.
Like he must have been standing out there for like half an hour.
You have to really know Magic Man to appreciate these stories, but Magic Man had a bit of a run in Japan, and like he was with Kai and Tai over there, I believe. I mean, he was with some like stuff over there that like would shock you. And you brought up Pete Madden. Pete Madden is one of my all-time favorite dudes. He was just he still calls me. He's an over-the-road truck driver, and he still calls me, and I love talking with Pete. We can talk for hours.
And that's awesome.
He's just he just always got it. He loves life. Yeah. He loves having fun. Like it was funny because some people didn't necessarily love Pete Madden's style of wrestling, which would Pete Madden like on AEW would probably be like the top star because he wrestled a tree once. Like he wrestled stuff that was like he could do stuff like that. But the dude always understood like important things in life, and dude was great. And he would travel with Magic Man. He'd be sort of Magic Man's handler, and they would go on these trips across the country, and the stories they had were just, I mean, he could write a book. It was great.
You didn't believe him until you saw the video or you saw the stuff happen in person.
It was so good.
There was one time after a show, Trevor Murdoch's car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. And I went to like drive around the block so that I could come around the right way to give him a jump. And in that time, like the car was running when I come up, and I'm like, what the hell happened? And Trevor's just like doubled over laughing, and Magic Man's like dusting off his shoulder. Apparently Magic had come out and said, "Oh, I'll fix it," and he like rubs his hands together and puts them on the hood, and he's like, "Try starting the car," and it started.
Yes, that sounds correct.
And then when you brought in Christopher Daniels, and you brought him to the party afterwards, and beforehand, like a few months before, Magic had given me this framed photograph of him, and it's like this really badly photoshopped thing of him flying a kite, getting hit by lightning. And he says, "I want you to hang this in your bathroom." And I'm like, "Cool, what is it?" And he's like, "It's proof of my work with Ben Franklin."
Yeah, I mean, it's a nut job. He's great. Yeah.
But Daniels goes to use the restroom, and he comes out, like we hear him yell, like "Holy crap!" in the bathroom, and he comes out holding the picture. He's like, "You guys know the Magic Man?"
No shit. This happened this happened with people all the time. You'd be like, you would not, like, you'd bring in somebody that you would, like, had no connection to, you know, like, not Bill Eadie, but somebody like that, and they'd be like, "Oh, God, you know, Magic Man, yeah, he's one of my, Jackson, he's great." I'm like, Are you freaking serious? Everybody knows this guy.
And that was how I discovered the story of how Magic Man got booked in Japan.
Refresh my memory.
Have you ever heard this?
No, I don't remember this.
Okay. He, in, like, wrestler gimmick, sent a VHS to Michinoku Pro of him doing all these magic tricks because he was an actual stage trained magician. And they see it and they're like, "Oh my God, like it's a wrestler that can do like high-end magic. Like we have to book this guy."
Sure.
So they contact him, they bring him out, and he's going to be facing Hakushi in the main event. And he's like, "Oh, great." You know, like they tell him like he's going to be on this tour and he's going to main event every night. He's like, "That's fantastic. So he's going to teach me how to wrestle."
Exactly. He was like he was a second. He wasn't necessarily a man. He was more of a manager and the wrestler. Yes.
And then they were like, "Oh no!" So they taught him like how to take like a basic bump. So then he would come out each night and like really make the crowd angry because he was great at that.
Oh yeah.
And like, you know, doing his like floating $100 bill or whatever. And then like whoever was main eventing that night would come out and knock him down 1, 2, 3. And so, like, by the end of the tour, everyone's wanting to work with Magic Man because they knew they wouldn't have to take a bump or do anything other than that and get the biggest pop of the night.
That's everyone's dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
how he got in Japan.
Look, the guy is only a personality that you would meet in professional wrestling, really, is all I can say.
100%.
I mean, it's just the dude. There's people like that. Pete Madden, same thing. I mean, same kind of guy. Pete Madden has done surfing, rock star, wrestler. Like he's done it all, and he's still married, which is amazing. But he's such a great dude. I'm sure he can find ladies that like him. But yeah, no.
I'm sure Magic Man's still divorced.
I have no idea. In fact, the last time I talked to Pete Madden about Magic Man, he said he had stopped talking to Pete, and I think he's gotten a little out there. So I'm not, and more so than we knew. So but he was quite entertaining guy, and like he brought his little motorcycle to drive around Turner Rec at our shows, and he would have all these things that he would bring, and he was such a fun dude, and he enjoyed being there a lot. So that's what I love about all those guys. That, like you said, the Metro Pro crew, the Kansas City crew from like 2010 to 2016 was like one of my favorite groups of all time, just because, like you said, it was just such a tight-knit group. A lot of people based out of here and a lot of regulars, and it was really fun, and I'm glad that's how we got to meet doing that.
Yeah, and I'm glad I think it was like the last party or the second to last, you had brought Pierce in, and Adam had the foresight to say, like, let's take a picture together.
Yeah.
It was at one of the parties, like all of us together.
That wasn't the pizza party, right? That was the pizza party was before, right?
Well, they were all pizza parties.
Well, yeah. the incident with the pizza, that's not that one, right?
No,
Okay.
That was the first one.
Okay.
Where I was like, oh, my career's over because I didn't get the pizza there in time.
So, for those that don't know, the pizza parties that Rob would have, he would take money out of his own pocket and buy these damn pizzas and hope that some of the wrestlers would chip in. Now, if you know anything about wrestlers, there was like 1 out of 10 chipped in. So,
right.
Rob would be stuck with this stupid bill, but he'd buy, was it Minsky's? You'd buy these pizzas that were like freaking 4 foot by 4 foot.
Pizza.
They were huge. Yeah. Normally it would be like something low level, like the low Gumby's is what I recall in college. But Gumby's pizza would be that. But you'd get Minsky's pizza and everyone would get it. And so this one particular time, and I guess it was it the seven levels of hate?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when Adam Pearce won the world title from someone else.
Won the world title from a man named Colt Cabana. And like Adam Pearce had like 102-degree fever that night, but he had the NWA title change hands in Kansas City, which was awesome. And they ended up, the pizza was... they must have been backed up at Minsky's because it was late. But man,
it was late. Colt
Cabana threw the biggest fit that pizza was not there in time, and to a point that like everyone there was embarrassed. And so it was shocking how Colt Cabana reacted to that. And now knowing and seeing what has transpired since then, nothing shocks me. So anyway, but that's
that was the first time I was on the receiving end of a wrestling promo. Not the last, but that was the first.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you got into, it was like your high school before college, the Metro Pro, so you could get ready for all the other crap that might happen. Because seriously, if you wouldn't have actually had a little bit of seasoning in the independent level of wrestling before you started working as an artist for WWE, I think things could have gone differently, possibly.
Oh yeah, there was. I mean, like I had Big Show in my face one time, not playing around, and I was able to defuse it, like with some of the things that I'd learned working with you guys.
That's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Goldust, he super sweet guy, but has a particular sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
That it's like he's always in heel mode, but he's playing around. and so like I was able to read that, like, oh, he's not actually saying this to me. He's just popping himself and whoever's around that knows his humor. There's not a lot of guys like that anymore.
That era is sort of gone now, but I sort of miss that era because if you're used to that era, that's an awesome era. But if you're not used to it, you hate that era. I mean, I get it.
And there were definitely guys that took it too far. That is why we don't get to have that fun anymore. But like Top Dollar from Hit Row,
Yes.
was he's kind of got that sense of humor. So he and I were going back and forth because he was like, "Where's my new painting?" And I'm like, "I'm not doing a new painting for you," and we're doing this in front of like staff. And like after he leaves, they come up to me like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." Oh man, you guys would not have survived around gold dust.
Yeah, I know. I think it's funny. You sort of bridge a gap of some generations here to where you're used to the complete ribbing that would happen. I feel like you were sort of on that final edge of the guys that could get away with that. And when Vince was fully in charge, and like still that territory era through the Attitude Era guys were still around. Those guys are the ones that get away with that. But the dudes that are going through the Performance Center and now going up to the roster, no freaking way they would have understood any of that.
No. But even like that, yeah, it's a different generation. Like at Royal Rumble this year, Bailey and I were talking about like we blinked and now we're the ones that have been around forever.
I know, it's
like
weird.
Our group, right? And I told her like, yeah, like Cora Jade from NXT was there, and I could hear her like across the hallway saying like, "Oh, what like when I turned on Roxanne, like it was inspired by like my favorite thing from my childhood that I saw, which was when Seth Rollins turned on the Shield," and I'm like, "Oh." Because I'd been there for a while before that happened.
Not Hogan getting slammed by Andre, but yes, the Shield is now considered old school. I know, dude. Right? I feel old every day. Yeah.
and Rock's daughter Simone, Ava Rain, is there now. And when I did my first painting of her, she was like, "I've dreamed of this since I was a little kid, having you do a painting of me." And I'm like, "What?" And then I did the math. I'm like, "Oh no, you have."
You were like 6 when this started. Yeah. Oh man. Well, that's awesome. That means you've had a good long career, and that's good. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Rob, it's been awesome going down memory lane. I could talk about stories with you all the time because there's a lot of stories that we cannot talk about on here, but and like some classic stories, some from Waterloo, some from other places. But I appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome knowing you for all these years, and very proud of what you've become, man.
Thanks, Chris.
It's the worst territory.
All right, welcome back. What a great interview with Rob Schamberger. It's great to hear all the stories from a slightly different perspective. Usually we have people that were quote unquote workers or bookers or, kind of akin to the Dan Geyer interview that, are wrestling adjacent, but have a long, deep, rich history. And, it's kind of cool to hear that someone took a different route with professional wrestling as far as artwork goes. And his artwork is incredible.
Yeah, and look, I thought it was cool to talk about his perspectives on art and how they've changed over the years, because I think I agree with him wholeheartedly when he said that, basically it's sort of hard to let your guard down and sort of take a huge deep breath when you're working there, because you're always wanting to impress them. And in my case, I always wanted to not get fired by Stephanie. So, you just never can like let your, you can never feel comfortable there. And that's good and bad. Depending on what perspective you're coming from that company. But Rob is a great dude. And like I said, he's a Kansas City guy. And the fact that he is known as the artist of WWE is super awesome compared to 15 years ago. He was just doing it at Turner Rec Center in the corner. So I think it's awesome for him.
I haven't seen him at a show in a long time. He must be, laying low or, been pretty busy or whatever. But yeah, I used to see him quite a bit, even post NWL. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, no, he's still around town. I keep in touch with all his stuff. He has some cool stuff on YouTube where he shows how he paints things, and I like I told him, I thought his techniques have changed with time here, because I think any artist after a while someone's going to get sick of what you're doing 100%. So you sort of have to always evolve, and I think he's done that.
Okay, well, who do we got coming down the pipe, so to speak, or who do we got in the
pipe?
Yeah, the proverbial pipe.
Let's see. So
speaking of pipe, real quick, thank you for the Val Venus picture.
Yes. Well, no, in case no one knows, if you want to look this up, if you want to see the worst T-shirt ever put out by WWF, WWE, whatever, it was 97, 98. Val Venus had a shirt that said, "I am cocked on the front, and on the back it said locked and ready to unload Val Venus, and it's written in semen. And if you want to see that, you should pull that up on Google Images, because people don't really believe that existed. But I've never met somebody that actually owned one, because wrestling shirts, Gabe, are one of those things. Like, I love a lot of these wrestling shirts, and I love a lot of shirts in like New Orleans that says, F you, you effing F, stuff like that. But I'm like, where am I going to wear that at? And that's how a lot of wrestling shirts are.
Yeah, that's true. Like, there was a long time where wrestling shirts just weren't cool. It didn't matter if it had Hogan on it, or it's like, I'm not 5. I'm not wearing a cartoon of Hogan ripping his shirt off. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do that. So you had to kind of think about the audience when you would buy the t-shirt.
But what about the next era where it was written in semen, or it was like the Ho Train or any of this stuff? It's like, where are you going to wear that? Your son church? Where are you going to wear that?
But that was the 90s, dude. I mean, I used to wear a shirt that said like F this town or something like that, because I hated my hometown, and I saw it at Hot Topic, and I'm like, I'm going to wear this shirt that says F this town. You know what I mean? In 90s were just wild, dude. We couldn't get away with anything. Today, like, dress, speak, it doesn't matter. 90s it was like, I remember seeing, like, I mean, the things they would show on ECW, it's like, you're like a quarter of an inch away from this woman's vagina.
Yeah.
Because they're catfighting, they're wearing very skimpy underwear. And it's like, that would never happen today, ever.
No, you're right. I was going to say anything before the 2000s was probably going to be considered like canceled now, but 90s were probably the worst. And it was because of the whole sort of the growing of quote unquote reality television and its infancy, which was, Jerry Springer, Cops, stuff like that was very like in your face more than anything you've ever seen at the time. But yeah, I mean, the wrestling shirts then were just horrible. But anyway, coming down the proverbial pike is we talked to Craig Kieseman, known as Niles Planquet, and he was trained by a long-time Central States wrestler, promoter, referee named Sonny Myers. Now, a lot of people don't remember Sonny because he passed away a long time ago at this point, but he was a mainstay in the St. Joe area. He was incredibly liked by everyone that knew him. He ended up being a sheriff up in the county up there that he lived in, and he had a long career. He had a traveling carnival. I mean, Craig talks about training with him, because Craig was not a student of the game when he was a child. He is now, but when he was a kid, he doesn't know a lot of, or he didn't at the time, know a ton of history about wrestling. But training under Sonny Myers, who was a huge part of Central States in the 50s, 60s, 70s. The only video I've really seen of Sonny Myers, and the latest video was when he was a referee, and he would not get down to count to 3. He would count to 3 like a horse, like with his foot, like 1, 2.
Oh, okay.
And like he would just like stomp his foot like Mr. Ed or whatever, And it was funny to see him do that. But he was told he was like the slowest referee ever. But it didn't matter. He was a huge star in his day, and Craig talks about training with him. Talks about training with him when he was sort of partnering up with Lord Littlebrook, and like had all the midget wrestlers up there with him too, which would have been a wild scene if you're Craig Kieseman at 17 years old learning how to wrestle. And just talks about what he thought of the Central States area. And I don't know. Sonny Myers to me is one of those guys that was sort of lost in some ways in history, and I want people to still talk about him. So we'll talk to him about that. Also, Rob Schamberger, as we heard in the interview, he gave me information on how to get a hold of Bob Geigel's daughter, because I'd love to hear her perspective on growing up in Bob Geigel's house. And,
no
having
kidding.
to live through all the pieces of his life, whether it was the NWA president, he's on television for NWA, WCW back then or whatever. And then, going through everything he had to go through at Memorial Hall in Kansas City, and friends with Harley, and, gosh, I can Bulldog Bob Brown. I suppose I heard Bulldog Bob Brown was somehow involved in her wedding, which I mean, they all hung out together, so I'm sure they did that. But her father worked till he was like 88 years old. So I would love to hear her perspective. And also, he gave me the number to JJ Dillon, who I guess worked in The Office in Central States in 1981. So I'd love to get his perspective on that. I've met JJ multiple times, but I've never talked to him about Kansas City. So looking forward to those.
Nice. I would love, if we can coordinate schedules, I would love to be on the interview with JJ Dillon. I probably won't say much, because I'll just sit there and be like, you managed 4 Horsemen. Good. And then I'll just phase out after that. All right, so we have come to our favorite portion of the podcast where we will put Chris Goff under the limelight like he needs it, and we will get to know him a little bit better. And here's your menu today. Of course, Chris, we have Mount Rushmore. We have what was Mount Rushmore? Which one do we other do? Oh, the hot seat. And for your favorite holiday, today we have Mardi Gras Madness.
Oh, well, I'll have to do that.
Okay.
Mardi Gras Madness.
Of course. So Mardi Gras Madness really only has to do with one word in that statement, and that's madness. So what I want you to do is choose the 3 best Macho Man matches for people to watch and why.
Oh man, there's so many.
I know that's what makes it great. And I can see Macho Man being into Mardi Gras, by the way. I don't know why. I just can see him being into it.
Well, he would definitely be Macho Man if he had on his most colorful gear, could walk down Bourbon Street and no one would bat an eye. That's just how it is there.
Right.
No, the thing about him, first of all, I'm a WWF boy, so
Sure.
I grew up on that. So I have I haven't seen any matches in ICW back in the day with his father's promotion, or really, I didn't really watch when he was in his necessarily the heyday, and either Memphis or WCW when he jumped ship. So, the ones that obviously the biggest ones that everyone talks about, obviously WrestleMania 3,
yes,
WrestleMania 5, the pinnacle of arguably the greatest storyline in WWF history with the Mega Powers exploding. Those are like 2 of the biggest matches ever. In WWF history. And then, ones that I really appreciated was I loved his match with the Ultimate Warrior.
Me too. I was hoping you were gonna say that. Because
the Ultimate Warrior usually didn't put on that great of a match, but that was a great match. And it was obviously because of Macho Man. No, but the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man was I'm trying to remember what that was. SummerSlam.
I believe so. Yes.
And it was, and one that, I'm thinking of these other ones that I remember so well. I loved the Macho King stuff where he would
oh my God,
have battles with Hacksaw and whoever else wanted to try to get that crown from him.
And that was the end of the Warrior, or the end of the King. Macho King was with the Ultimate Warrior.
Yes.
Because he reunited with Elizabeth and all that kind of stuff.
So the Mega Maniacs, did you ever watch and do you remember when he teamed up with the Ultimate Warrior and they were a tag team, not the Mega Powers, they were called the Mega Maniacs. And I believe my friend and I were only talking about this. They only had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 televised matches together because they were in a tag match with IRS. And that was that. I mean, if they
Money Inc.
Money Inc. IRS and $1 Million Man.
Yeah.
Money Inc. versus Mega Maniacs. And the Mega Maniacs would have been so over with me if they would have stuck around, but they didn't because that was the era where, Ultimate Warrior was in and out every 6 months. So it didn't last long, but that would have been a fun one to see more of. I love the No Holds Barred match with that was a huge match for me as a child.
Yeah, with
Hogan and Brutus the Barber versus Zeus and
Macho King. Yeah,
and that's when Sensational Scary Sherry was at her peak. I love that era of WWF. And finally, WrestleMania 10. This isn't the greatest match of all time, but that was the can you leave the match? That was him versus Crush. Oh, and remember he tried to hang Crush by his feet with that chain.
Yes.
And he tried, and it was basically who can get out of it, who can get back to the ring. And so it's sort of a last man standing match, but it was a weird last man standing rules. Basically he ran back to the ring and it didn't, the contraption didn't really work. So Crush was getting I remember down. That. And basically if the ref counted the 10 before Crush could get back to the ring, Macho won. So, there was he had so many. I mean, Macho Man added so much. He was such an unbelievable,
not a huge guy.
No,
but really. You would never know it because his personality was gigantic. The fact, I mean, honestly, like you pointed out, he made most everybody that he worked with, because he worked with a lot of duds. Let's be real about it. He made everyone he worked with that was like that better. And even if they were above, quote unquote, his skill level, I really did enjoy his feud with Diamond Dallas Page. You said, you didn't watch it in that era, but his feud with Diamond Dallas Page was really good. I really enjoyed, of course he had lost a step and all that kind of stuff going into WCW. I think that was kind of the tail end of everything, but he was just he made his punches, everything he did was so damn good,
Yeah, no, he was fantastic. And I thought of him the other day because I don't know why the death of Lanny Poffo it bothered me, because Lanny Poffo was like he was in such good shape, and he was like a good dude, and he really loved his brother and his family. And Lanny just had like I don't know, I always liked Lanny Poffo, like as a person. I met him multiple times.
I was gonna say you actually met, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have like a huge relationship with him or anything, but he was just like a dude that I sort of, for some reason, for booking purposes and like independent wrestling, I always followed him, just because I was always like, I always thought it would be fun to have the Genius come in and read a poem at a Metro Pro show or something.
Yeah,
but he wasn't necessarily going to be a huge draw for that reason or anything. But I followed him moving to Ecuador. And
I was going to say he moved to Ecuador, right?
He had like I couldn't tell if it was going to be his new wife or if he just had a lot of like really young girlfriends over there. But he looked so young and he lost all this weight. And I was like, man, this guy has really found the fountain of youth in Ecuador. And like, he's got, I think he has children and a ex-wife in this country. So it wasn't like he had nothing here, but he basically just uprooted himself and was living his best life in another country. And then he came, I saw that, I'd always see his posts. He saw Wicked at a Broadway show, like 2 days before he died. He's posting about it being in the Gershwin Theater. And then he passed away. It's just sort of, I don't know, it's just odd. I guess his brother also had a heart attack too, so I guess it ran in the family. But
yeah, I mean,
but enough about Genius. I'm not trying to bring him back to, but I was thinking of Macho the other day just for that reason, and that family is just an unbelievable family. Not that they get forgotten and everything, but just the from his father to his brother to him. I mean, like what
and the loyalty that they all had towards each other, and the real love that seemed to be shared, especially between those three, between Angelo, Lanny. And what was Randy's shoot name?
You're gonna make me. Wasn't it Randy Poffo?
Was it Randy? I don't know.
I believe it was. I believe it was Randy Poffo.
But yeah, the genuine love that they had for each other, is really admirable. And it's funny that you mentioned Lanny Poffo. He was known for something. Anyways,
something I wish I could do, but no. That whole family was fantastic, and Macho Man. In that era of, when he came to WWE in the mid 80s to when he left to go to WCW in, 93-ish, 94-ish. I mean, he was, obviously top. What would you say to a WWF fan, if they named the top guys ever in WWE, he's going to be in the top 5, if not top 3. Yeah.
When I talk to non-wrestling fans, they go Hogan, Jake the Snake. They go, remember the guy that came out with the snake? Oh my God, he's big. Still around? Macho and then Undertaker are the 4 that I really can say. People go, dude, I used to watch the guy that was like dead, and he like blah blah blah. And and that kind of goes to actually your thing of like characters and being a WWF guy. When you ask wrestling fans at large who haven't been wrestling fans, they never go, what happened to Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard?
No one ever says that, and it's because they're boring. That's why. I mean, like it's like they're really good wrestlers and they're great dudes. Like Arn Anderson's a great dude, but they're just not flashy, and that's not what Arn Anderson was. That's not what NWA WCW was at that time. So I get it. I totally understand, but that was the reason why I like WWF, because as a child, which is what it was geared towards, and that's why people love WWF, is I went towards the people that were more colorful, and that was WWF. So, Macho Man, you couldn't get more colorful than him. Him, Dusty Rhodes, Hogan. Jake had a snake, and he was very he cut some awesome promos. He wasn't as colorful as those guys, but I mean, when he got older.
He thinks Kenny Omega is the greatest wrestler of all time.
Well, he's getting paid by the company that employs Kenny Omega as an EVP. So I understand why he says that. Arn Anderson also says the greatest company he's ever worked for. So When it happened, this is a thing you'll see in wrestling, Gabe. Anyone that works for wrestling companies, since there's only 2 that pay well in the entire globe, they always say really good things about their company until they go, and then they're like, they're the worst.
Yeah.
Let me play yo-yo as superstar Billy Graham. I mean, oh, you made my rent check this week. Oh, I love WWE. It's the best place. And then it's like, no, we didn't pay you this week. Oh, I hate. They're the worst. They made me take drugs. Okay. I mean,
is he still alive?
He is.
Oh, man. All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of The Worst Territory in the World. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating if you haven't already. And that way we can get more noticed in the algorithms and in the YouTube or the iTunes charts, all that kind of stuff. And leave us a review while you're at it. And tell us how great me and Chris are and how our chemistry is just through the roof. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you next week right here on The Worst Territory in the World.